Welcome back to the Shea Station podcast. This is an emergency reaction to the JD Martinez signing. Jerry will be joining me on the show. He's joining me for a little bit. He's currently on date night in St. Petersburg, so I don't want to take him away from that for too long, but he wanted to come on with his phone and get his thoughts out there. We'll be doing a full, more in-depth episode next week, so if you want some more full conversations, just wait until then. But if you're excited like we are, then tune in right now to Shea Station.
Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your mustache. Now get up out your seat. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Shea Station.
It's March 21st. It's 10 p.m. at night Eastern Time. Jerry Blevins is out on date night, but duty calls because the Mets have signed JD Martinez. Jerry, the grind truly never stops for you. This is something we were asking for last week on the show. I'm happy you're here to give your 2 cents. Tell me what the vibe in your head is right now about JD Martinez.
Is make sure my wife is not near me so I can think about Mets for a minute. Not allowed to do that most of the time on date night. But
Right.
I'm so, to me, legitimate contenders now. The big question mark is still the rotation. You know, Kodai Senga being out, that is the biggest question mark. But having signed JD Martinez, somebody to protect Pete Alonso. We were talking about moving Brandon Nimmo there. You know, we've seen what McNeil's done, but putting JD Martinez behind Pete Alonso, most likely, I think this makes them way better of a team, like a significant signing.
Yeah, I mean, the Mets waited a while. We're a week out from opening day, but this deal got to the point where it was too good not to put pen to paper on. $4.5 million for this year, $12 million total. So they're not even getting hit bad by the luxury tax.
And
And of
first of all, I feel bad for him because he deserves more than that. But it's
course,
great Mets because I think this is. I mean, they've been missing this guy for 3 seasons now, 4 seasons, and they finally got to find somebody. You know, he's not a left-handed slugger, but he's a power guy, and he can produce behind Pete Alonso.
yeah, I mean, he's not a left-handed slugger, but he does mash against lefties. I'll dive into the numbers a little bit later. But the big thing is that the Mets DH options during spring training were not getting it done, from Vientos to Ji-Man Choi, DJ Stewart, Luke Voigt. I think the Mets felt the pressure of another year with the DH kind of being a non-factor in their lineup. They were one of 6 teams at the bottom of the league for OPS from their DH last year. We have been asking for this since basically the inception of our podcast, for someone in this lineup to protect Pete
Oh,
Alonso with authority.
it was Kyle Schwarber the whole way.
I mean, we had the read on that from the get-go. Obviously, that didn't come together, but in terms of value, it doesn't get better than this.
This is for value. This is best case scenario, and good for them. This is David Stearns' mind, keeping, not rushing, not pushing it. Stevie Cohen's money. He was looking for 18, I want to say. Gets 4.5 with some deferred. It's wild what he's been capable of on the market. But again, this makes the Mets lineup have significant thunder. If he can produce like he did last year, like you said, you'll go over the numbers after you let me go back to date night. But this is significant.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. You can order the lineup whatever way you want, but the fact of the matter is, it takes the Mets from this kind of fringe wild card team, probably selling at the deadline, to possibly a wild card spot, and it's still in line with their plans for 2025. This is a 1-year deal. If things go awry towards the deadline, JD Martinez is someone the Mets could trade probably for a good package. So it stays in line with the roadmap they've set for themselves, but it also gives them a way better chance of competing early on in the season.
Doesn't produce, it's not, they're not hamstrung with a huge contract, and they can bring a guy like Vientos. If Vientos is the odd man out, like it seems, they can bring Vientos back up to collect those ABs. If they're not competing, it's not a big gamble. They didn't overinvest and force their hands to put out this lineup. They can still pivot and work on development. But this does make them, on paper, significant contenders with how good Luis Severino has looked, and with Sean Manaea looking as good as he has.
Yeah, I mean, if that rotation holds up and the bullpen is what we think it is, then the lineup doesn't really become such a looming question anymore.
with Senga getting off the mound or just playing catch again and working back up, if all those things go well, if all the dominoes fall in the Mets' favor, this is a big deal. And I hope, again, spring training is all about being optimistic. This is a win. This is a huge win for the Mets.
It's the most optimistic and excited I've been about Mets baseball pretty much the entire offseason, and we're 7 days out from the first game.
It's not just about seeing my face.
Oh no, of course not. I mean, yeah, I'd love seeing Jerry Blevins at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night. It's not conventional.
We're usually
But yeah, exactly. We're usually morning people, and also you've got this stunning background now. Like this might be your new home office.
I
Who
don't.
knows?
It's very pretentious. I feel it. I've earned it. So
Yeah, I mean, this is the life of luxury. This is what St.
I've got
Petersburg riches get you.
so
Sorry, one more time.
I've got good friends, so we're
Oh
good.
yeah, friends in high places.
Oh,
Well,
love you, Jolly. It was great, and let's go Mets.
let's go Mets, Jerry. Absolutely. Thanks for stopping in on your date night. Now, please get the Mets out of your mind and go be a good husband.
Sounds good. See you, buddy.
Cool. All right, so it'll be just me for the rest of the episode. Jerry, thank you to him for making some time out of his date night, a pretty much impossible request. I'm sure we'll give our full thoughts in a longer episode next week. But there's a lot to be excited about on the JD Martinez front. We'll start with the numbers because that's what I usually specialize in the first place. Last year, he played 113 games, most of those at DH, only 3 games in left field. So that's kind of what you're getting with JD Martinez, a true designated hitter. That's also what Mets fans have been asking for quite a while. He clubbed 33 home runs last year, 103 RBIs, a 134 OPS plus. Those were his best totals in each of those respective stat categories since 2019, a 4-year window there since the juiced ball year. Some things that are exciting me. JD Martinez mashed against lefties last year, and he's mashed against lefties his entire career. And 136 plate appearances last year, a 925 OPS. Now, the Mets have notoriously struggled against southpaw pitching for basically as long as you and me have been alive. So this is a welcome change to the Mets lineup. And it was something that we were relying on in guys like maybe Harrison Bader, who might not be a conventional power hitter in a prototypical lineup. Also, one thing I want to know, JD Martinez batted 5th a lot last season, and that's something he might be doing a lot this season if Pete Alonso is batting cleanup. In 209 plate appearances last year, batting 5th for the Dodgers, a 978 OPS. And naturally, when you're batting 5th, you're going to have a lot of opportunities with runners in scoring position. With those situations last year, a 1.025 OPS and 146 plate appearances. Notice how every time I issue a split here, the numbers get better and better. This is what makes it such a perfect fit in this lineup, and it's why we've been asking for it basically forever since the beginning of this offseason. Last thing I want to note, runners in scoring position with 2 outs, the numbers go up again, a 367 batting average, a 1.216 OPS. So I can sit here and I can spout numbers at you all day and all night long, and I'd love to because JD Martinez is a very exciting signing. But I want to put it into the scope of how important it is to the Mets as a whole. I mentioned briefly when Jerry was back on the show with me that the DH performances from Mets hitters in spring training was, I think, a big reason why the Mets kind of pushed the needle and made it across the finish line with this JD Martinez contract. Mark Vientos, I'd say he was the best of the bunch here. He's clubbed 4 home runs. He's hit the ball hard in spring training, a 722 OPS. But I think the Mets didn't have a ton of confidence in him because the big thing that has plagued him has continued to plague him in spring training. 17 strikeouts to just 2 walks, a lot of whiffs, not a ton of plate discipline from Mark Vientos, and that is something that JD Martinez brings to the table as a seasoned veteran of the game. He's been in the league now for 12 seasons, so it's something he's wrapped his head around despite his strikeout numbers going up a little bit last year. With that, the Mets supplemental options that they tried to poke around as maybe wild card choices for the DH spot have not worked out in the slightest. Ji-Man Choi got off to a nice start. He's tailed back a little bit in his spring training numbers, though. I think he has a shot to make the roster, being that DJ Stewart has a minor league option. DJ Stewart, on the other hand, 1 home run, 1 RBI, and 9 strikeouts in 33 spring training at-bats. As for Luke Voigt, he's been the worst of the bunch, just 3 hits in 33 at-bats, a 100 batting average of 422 OPS. So across the board, the numbers from the supplemental DH options have been weak. And I think that necessitated some kind of change from the Mets. It would have been a little bit too much pressure on Mark Vientos, but it does become a question of what his spot on the roster becomes now, because he is a right-handed DH, and that's what JD Martinez is, and that's what he's getting paid to do on the New York Mets. Does that mean that Mark Vientos starts the year in AAA after maybe having a a lineup spot carved out for him for the past month or so. I'm not really sure, but his numbers haven't ticked up in the way that Brett Beatty's has in the past month or so, and he'll be getting the keys at third base. So I'm really curious to see what the Mets end up doing with Mark Vientos, but it's not from a sore heart because I do think, as much as I like the prospect of Vientos stepping up and getting playing time, this is just a much better option from a fan standpoint. This is a proven major league hitter. You know his track record, you know what he's capable of. And if the Mets load manage him and take care of him and get him in 120 games this year, he could completely change the trajectory of this season. The difference between having JD Martinez for the first 4 months of the season could be the difference between buying and selling at the deadline. Now, I'm not going to go into the entire other side of the team between the rotation and bullpen and all that. This is going to be focused solely on the offense. Now, I don't want to sing praises for JD Martinez exclusively because there's a reason he was still out there on the free agent market. There are some issues with his game, some caveats to this signing. The biggest one being, I think, his age. He is 36 years old this season, which is a bit scary of a number. But I want to remind everybody that Justin Turner, who turns 38 this year, signed a contract for $1 million more than JD Martinez with the Toronto Blue Jays. He's also going to be a DH this year. So I think when you put it in that scope, it feels a little bit better. The biggest thing for me, and I alluded to it a little bit before, is JD Martinez's strikeout rate. It went up a lot last year. It spiked to 31.1% in 2023. It was down at 24% the year prior, and that's where it sat on his career average entering last year, 24%. So a 7% spike in striking out does make me a little bit concerned. Is he slowing down a little bit in his swing? Can he not catch up to the fastball anymore? These are going to be things I want to look out for. These are supplemented by the kind of the obvious things that come with an older player. He's not that fast anymore. 19th percentile sprint speed, 35th percentile walk rate, and obviously he's a true DH. He's only played 3 games in the field in the past 2 seasons. So if JD Martinez does hit a slump, it does create something of a hole in a lineup. But in terms of what the Mets have dealt with at DH the past few years, being that basically the only good stretches we've had at DH were JD Martinez, or excuse me, JD Davis for a brief time in 2021, and then Daniel Vogelbach basically right after the trade deadline in 2022. I think we'd welcome JD Martinez and any slumps that might come with him with open arms. So in terms of the contract itself, let's dive a little bit into that because it is a little bit funky. It's $12 million on the surface. And if you are familiar with where the Mets payroll is at, that would have meant that they would take a huge hit in terms of the tax spent on each dollar for their payroll. But JD Martinez is only getting $4.5 million this year, as we mentioned before when Jerry was on the show. There's going to be $1.5 million a year deferred from 2034 to 2038. This is a report from Andy Martino, who helped break the deal with John Heyman. So this significantly reduces the luxury tax penalty for this year. And the deferrals mean that the money's probably going to go down in the years that follow this year. So it's going to be worth less than the status of 20 or 12 million that it's currently listed at right now. So that's a really good sign for the Mets. And I think that's why they kind of wanted to wait and see if the price would come down in this deal, because I think it got to the point where they simply couldn't say no to it. Whereas the 18 million, $20 million asking price that JD Martinez had set beforehand kind of was out of the realm of possibility for the Mets, especially considering what their plan was for this year in the first place. And it just helps a lot because when you look at both the number 5 spot and the DH spot in the Mets lineup, those two things have been black holes for even when the Mets were good in 2022. They've been, sore spots in this lineup. Last year, Will Salmon reported this in a tweet. The Mets' number 5 batters produced a 652 OPS. That was better than only 2 teams in baseball, so it was 28th in MLB. It was only better than the Detroit Tigers and the Oakland A's. That is not company you want to share in 2023. Even worse so, the DH spot itself has generated a 700 OPS from 2023. That was in the bottom 6 teams. I mean, this is supposed to be a premium position, a bonus to the National League that we added a few years ago, and the Mets really haven't taken advantage of it in any significant way. And this is the real first time that I think they're dipping their toe in a concrete committal way in terms of signing a pure DH. And I really hope that it pays off for them because this is something that fans have been clamoring for forever. And it's also traditionally in his past years, not something that David Stearns has done a lot. He doesn't spend a ton of money on hitters. He's very good at building rosters based on run prevention, speed, athleticism, and just kind of finding power elsewhere. The biggest, power hitter on David Stern's best Brewers team back in 2018 was Jesus Aguilar, and that guy was a waiver claim who basically got playing time in the platoon and then graduated to the starting role. David Stearns, I don't think in his wheelhouse pays for DHs, but this is the difference between Milwaukee and New York. The Mets have the resources to pull this kind of deal off. And I think next offseason, we can expect a lot more deals like this, paying for premium positions and not being afraid of whatever dollar sign comes with it, but also waiting for the right price. I think the Mets last year might have signed JD Martinez at that $20 million price tag. Not saying that he doesn't deserve it, but to get him at this price tag is so much better, not only for this team's payroll this year, but for the future of the Mets as well. And those are basically all my immediate thoughts on JD Martinez. I'm glad I was able to get this out. I'm glad Jerry was able to join me, even if only for a little bit of time. And I hope I did enough of a brush up for you on JD Martinez if you're listening or watching from the comfort of your home right now. So let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of the JD Martinez signing. Are you excited? Are you a little bit apprehensive? I really want to know the temperature of the fan base. And if you guys enjoyed this episode of Shea Station, a little bit single-handed episode, make sure you leave a like on the YouTube video, or if you're listening on a podcast app, consider leaving us a review. We'd really appreciate it. We will be back next week with a fun episode. We'll give more full in-depth thoughts and reactions to the JD Martinez signing, but we wanted to get something out there nice and quick for you guys on this Thursday night. So we appreciate you. We'll see you next time, and let's listen to the outro music ring out.
Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time.